In this part of the lesson, we're going to learn how to write logical tests using the NOT operator. The NOT operator is used to convert a true value into a false, and vice versa. So let's have a look at why that could be useful. Let's open up the file that I've already downloaded and extracted, and as ever, if you need to, you can click the Enable Content button to allow the existing code in the workbook to run. So we're looking at a similar example, one that we've seen in several other parts of this module so far, where you can review a movie by providing a simple score out of 10, the date you watched it and the movie title, and then clicking the Add to List button will transfer those details into the list of all the films you reviewed on the same worksheet. What we're going to do in this example is check if the user has entered a valid date into cell B3. And if they have not entered a valid date, then we'll be prevented from adding the film's details to the list. So let's start by heading into the Developer tab and then the Visual Basic Editor and look at what code we need to write to make that work. We'll start by using the isDate function. So let's begin an if statement and then look for the isDate function in the IntelliSense. Press Ctrl and space to see this list if you can't see it already. Now, unsurprisingly, as its name suggests, the isDate function determines whether something is a date or not. If I open some parentheses after the isDate function, it has a single parameter called expression, so you can pass any value of any data type into the isDate function, and it returns a Boolean value which can be either true or false. So if the value you pass into the function is a date, this function returns true, and if it's not a date, it returns false. So let's check if the value in cell B3 is a date. So I can set the value I'm passing into the function to the value of range B3, and then I can check if that is equal to false. Then, if that's the case, I will present an error message in cell A5. So I can say range A5 dot value equals, and then something like enter a valid date. So the user knows what they've done wrong and how to fix it. Then we can exit from the subroutine. We can stick in the end if, as we've written a block if, we need that. And then I suppose we should also think about clearing the contents of range A5, assuming that the user does eventually enter a valid date. So we should say range A5 dot clear contents. Now let's just check that that part of the system works. If we head back into the Excel window and then type something in here which clearly is not a date. Let's put in the word, I know, whenever, something like that. If I click the Add to List button, it should determine that that clearly is not a valid date. Okay, so far everything works, that's fine. My only issue at this point is that the code we've written isn't particularly elegantly written. When a function returns a Boolean value, true or false, you don't need to explicitly test if it is equal to true or equal to false. Just imagine for a moment we wanted to determine if the value in cell B3 is a date, so if it returns true. We could write the statement out and explicitly check if the result of the function is equal to true. But that's completely redundant. If I want to know if the value of the isDate function is true, I don't need the equals true part at all. This statement here is exactly the same as saying equals true at the end. We can do something similar with the equals false. Rather than explicitly saying equals false at the end, we can reverse the true into a false using the NOT operator. So we place the NOT operator before the thing we want to flip into true or false. So if not is date, then do something. I appreciate that takes a little getting used to if you haven't seen that sort of syntax before, but it's a much more elegant way to write these sorts of logical tests, and we'll be continuing to use that type of, or that style of writing as we go along. If you prefer, always bear in mind you can use the more explicit syntax, check if it is equal to true or equal to false, but this is the style that I'll try to use for the rest of this course. Let's just check that that works. We should always do that, of course. Let's head back to the Excel window. And again, we don't have a date typed in, so we click the Add to List button. That won't do anything. But if I do fill in a valid date, let's go back to the same one, 11/6/2018, and then click the Add to List button again. Now the details get added to my list. At this point, you can either continue with the extra practice session in this part of the lesson, which uses the isNumeric function to check whether you've entered a valid score. If you prefer, you can just move on to the next lesson in this module, which talks about using the select case statement.